Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Daniel, this is Nate, and we're coming to you with the final episode of 2025.
Wow.
You ready for this, Nate?
Yeah, totally. Let's wrap this year up in style.
We're going to wrap not only the year up, we're going to wrap up the series that we've been working on off and on for the last few months. We've been a little spotty here at the end of the year just because we've got a lot of big stuff happening. But we are finishing what we set out to accomplish with this series. 5 myths of music school growth, things that we see persisting, myths that persist about how to grow a big school, a profitable school, that we see even though there is an embarrassment of riches in our industry right now of resources, of podcasts, Facebook groups, school groups, all this sort of thing, knowledge out the wazoo, and yet we still see school owners making the same mistakes of thought and action, even, in my case, 10 years on after starting as a consultant in this industry. And so with this series, we wanted to do a kind of retrospective on the last 3 years of podcast episodes, nearly 4 years of podcast episodes. We want to do a retrospective on that and also just address these big picture items in a more concise format. We have our episode guide, which we will link to in the show notes. We typically do that. And you can go and do deep dives on each one of these topics. We've done a lot of episodes on them where we've explored micro facets of these things. But in this series, we wanted to look at the big picture. And today, the fifth myth, there's others we could have talked about, but the fifth myth is what we have been calling affectionately the promise trap. And it's the idea is that retention of students is this mystery that is somehow solved by good tactics. It's a tactical thing that we do by putting certain systems into place. Now, I just want to start by saying that one of the premises of this series was that we see a lack of definition, a lack of specificity, a lack of attention to detail in school owners around all of these topics. One of their primary errors is they're not getting detailed and specific enough. But in the case of the retention one, I don't want to make it seem as if we're contradicting ourselves. We still want to be fastidious. We still want to have attention to detail. We still want to fully envision and imagine the solution. But the problem with retention one is that what has been taught in our industry, unfortunately, is these gimmicks and tricks like, give people retention bracelets. It's one of my favorite things to pick on. Give kids these bracelets because they stayed in your studio and somehow that's going to fix your retention problem. It goes so much deeper than that. And damage has been done by well-meaning people by purveying, kind of cheap gimmicks and tricks like that. What we have found, both in our own individual experience in business and in the people that we have advised, consulted, and coached with, and in people we've worked with who have solved this problem, is that it actually goes much, much deeper than that. And I think it's fitting that we do this one last because we have already talked about delegation. We have already talked about culture. And that is also deeply embedded in this particular topic. So Nate, let's get into it. Retention, the promise trap. Any thoughts on what I've said so far before we dig into the why, what, how, and what if of this problem?
Just simply, I remember we had Jeff Homer from Ensemble Music on a couple of episodes back in the probably double digits. Can't remember exactly when.
Oh, it was early, Nate. It was like around episode 60.
Yeah, right. Dig it. And I just remember a quote from him in that one of those eps where he said, there is no number more important in this industry than retention. So if you're going to track, if your dashboard has a single metric on it, it's how many of the 100 families you enrolled a year ago are still with you today. And I just took that and I was like, fascinating. We track a lot of different numbers at Brooklyn Music Factory, but we absolutely do track our retention always. Yeah. And so it's just, I'm just I'm setting the table for our listeners because let's say you walk away with nothing from this pod except this one thing. I am going to start tracking retention.
Yes.
That's a worthwhile takeaway. right? Figure out how to begin to, calculate that and look at that number every week.
Yeah. Because, and this is the big why. Why is this important? Why are we taking time to talk about this? Nate said it. Churn quietly eats away at your profit margins. It eats at every new enrollment. And you don't notice this as an owner until you've spent thousands of dollars in ads just to replace the people that are quietly slipping out the back door. And this is what makes school ownership feel so frustrating sometimes. And I'll just tell a very quick story here. Years ago, I worked with a client who ended up, who came to me just for one problem. She said, my Google ads aren't working. She ended up becoming a long-term coaching client because when I actually dug into her numbers and I dug into her Google ads for conversion rates, what I discovered was her Google ads were working fine. Her numbers were well within great ranges. Her conversion on her website was good. Her landing pages were good. But this particular owner had churned essentially 100% of their student body the previous year. 100%. Right. They had 300 students on January 1st of that year. They had 300 students on January 1st of the next year. But almost all of the 300 students were brand new students. Yes. She didn't even realize.
Well,
and we went to work.
We can't get into the math right now, but once you start understanding and calculating the lifetime value of a family in your school or a student in your school, you will see that you are going to improve your financial health significantly by improving retention rather than improving new leads. Right? It's great if you have, it's awesome if you're that client that Daniel was referencing, and it turns out you're crushing it with your paid digital. But it's even better. Even better if you're crushing it with retention.
Well, and in this case, in her case, the fact that she was crushing it with paid digital without tracking was actually bad because she could have spent $0 on all that marketing or spent significantly less. And it would have actually been better because it would have surfaced the actual problem sooner.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. So Nate, I think, you have strong opinions on this. Let's just at the top of the episode here, get real. What is an ideal churn number? What should we be tracking? What should someone be shooting for? What's a red flag? What's an average in your experience, or at least in BMF's experience?
I think you can look for anything. Obviously, everything's a range, but what you want to aim for is about you're retaining 96% of your students month over month. Now, there are variables to this. Let's say you're like Brooklyn Music Factory and you close down your after-school program for 2 months a year and run a huge summer camp. And then, of course, that's going to shift a little bit your spring to fall, that kind of thing. But let's just say you're in November, you're moving to December, and you have 100 students. Ideally, in that month, you've lost certainly no more than 10, but ideally you've only lost about 4.
Now, Nate, let's talk real numbers here. If let's say you have 100, you lose 4, but your marketing efforts gained you 4. So net, you have 4 students replaced, and you're at 100 again every single month. If you maintain that ratio throughout the year, you started the month with 100, you finished the month with 100. For a month, you're still losing 48 students a year. That's half the student body. Do you feel that's really a realistic number to shoot for?
Let me give you very real numbers from the last 2 months because we actually just did a retention push to end through October and November. This time last year, we had lost. So Brooklyn Music Factory is at, I think our enrollment count for after school is somewhere maybe around 480, something like that. And last year we had lost 27 students. between October
Mm.
and November.
Mm.
Not talking about how many we gained, just
Mm.
that's how many enrollments.
Right.
And so we made it a project in the fourth quarter to try to cut that in half between
Mm.
October and November. Could we only lose, what is that, 14, something like that? We weren't
Yeah.
able to achieve that, but we lost certainly less than 27. I think our ending number was somewhere right around 18, 19, right?
Mm.
So that's how many we lost, over those 2 months. So
Can I
what's
stop you
the
there for a second?
Yeah, please do.
So losing 27 out of 480 is just over 5%. Losing only 18 out of 480 is about 3.7%. So certainly an improvement, certainly underneath that
Yes.
4%, and significant, because if you spread that over the year, the net
Yeah.
retention is an additional 144 students that stayed in the school versus churning.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Thank you for
Yeah.
the numbers on that. And I think it's important to, there's a couple of lessons. The first lesson before we dig into the meat of the app is that you're not judging yourself against every other school. You're judging yourself against your own numbers and how
Yeah.
to improve on those. So it is useful to be like, hey, here's what we're aiming for. But I would say basically it's anywhere between, like, I'd love it if it was at 2 to 3% always at BMF. But I'm just saying we've tracked it for years. And so
Mm.
historically, it's somewhere right around the 3 to 4%. But at the
Mm.
same time, we're going to have our highest, net income ever this year. So we've improved just enough in terms of the retention year over year to help that bottom line. And that's lesson number one. Look at what your churn rate has been year to date or year over year, and just try to improve on that. And pick specific times of the year where you know that you lose people. Right?
Mm.
It's very normal to lose people in October. They sign up, they're all excited, and then all of a sudden they're like, I don't know. Right? So you got that's a great time. Another great time is during the February dip. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody dips deep in winter. So that's a great time to put we called it the February dip about 10 years ago, and every January
Wow.
I bring it up, and we have a whole February plan.
Ooh.
but so you
So we're
just
getting
pick.
in. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go
we're getting.
ahead.
I'm stopping. Pause.
Yeah.
Back to you, Daniel. But those are the lessons. Lesson number one. What you're doing is you're taking this episode and then you're applying it to improve upon yourself. You're besting your own numbers, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
lesson number two is you 100% need to know how many people you lost this time last year versus this time this year, right? You
Okay.
do need to track those.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question. In the year over year improvement, gut reaction, if you had to answer this question, what makes families stay? How would you answer that question? And I want to think more abstract, conceptual here. We can get into how tos later.
Yeah.
But what's making families stay? What's the difference?
I'm gonna give just a sweeping, simple answer.
Love it. That's what I want.
Okay. Yeah. Parents want to know that you are thinking about their family. Simple as that. They don't want it to be simply a lesson that they've purchased. They want to know that you know about their child, you know about their challenges, their successes, and they want to hear from you outside of just the lesson itself in some way, shape, or form. And parents want to be involved. That's it. It's not that complicated. It's sort of like, last time you had an issue with your, whatever, you had some sort of customer complaint. You bought something and it was they sent you the wrong size.
Right.
And you're like, you got all heated for a second and you wrote them a complaint and then you heard right back, or they even called you and they're like, so sorry about that. How can we fix it for you? And all of a sudden you're like, this isn't so bad. That's an example of like all we actually want to know is that we're not just a number, that people
Okay.
are paying attention to us. So,
And so in that, I'm hearing that communication is really important with the family. I want to go even a level deeper than this, because I feel like I heard you say once that at baseline, even deeper than that, is the experience that the child has in the school. Can
100%.
you talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, totally. So, um, music lessons are a mystery to 98.5% of all parents, right? It's like magic. Like there's an instrument, they don't understand what that instrument is. In the rare instance that the parent plays it, they sort of do, but it's a mystery. And
Mm,
so what they respond to is less, what can my student do on this mysterious instrument, and more, how does my uh, how does my student or my child feel when they're at the instrument or when they come back from your music school, you know? Um, and so, it's the Oprah quote, right? People don't remember what you did; they just remember how you made them feel. And so, um, when I say experience, what I mean is that, we have a specific brand promise at BMF. Brooklyn Music Factory offers an alternative to the typical lesson with a game-based curriculum that inspires songwriting and a community that supports every step of the learning process. It's at the bottom of every one of our emails. We say it out loud when we on a sales call, blah, blah, blah. It's there. We put it in there. It's the very first piece of training that any teacher goes through, is breaking that down and being like, how do I know if I'm succeeding versus failing in a student's experience at Brooklyn Music Factory? Okay, so when you ask about experience, Daniel, the simple answer is this. Does this parent's child go to this mysterious lesson to learn this mysterious instrument? And A, does it feel like the lesson is an alternative from the typical one? Usually that means the lessons that parent had as a child that they quit. Okay, number
mm,
two, does it feel fun? In other words, is it game-based,
mm,
right? Is there a gamification to it? Three, is there some proof that a song was written or there was some version of songwriting involved? So when we talk about experience, we're essentially saying, did this child experience what we promised the parent? And so, the final piece of our brand promise is that there's a community that supports every step of the learning process. And, Daniel, we've talked about the community room at Brooklyn Music Factory a boatload, but it's there by design because it's in the brand promise. And so the very first impression that a parent gets at Brooklyn Music Factory is that community room,
mm.
right? And so retention relies on us following through on what we promised. And it's not done once, twice, two, or 3 or 4 times. It's done week after week, month after month, semester after semester. It just continues, but it's very pointed and focused. And the idea is you have to just ensure that a parent knows that experience, their child is having that experience, and their child's coming back excited to share it.
This episode is sponsored by GroupLessons.com. If you're looking for a group piano method that is easy to implement in your studio or school, look no farther than Piano Express from GroupLessons.com. Because unlike most group piano methods, Piano Express allows students to make individual progress within the context of a larger group. And because of the at-home practice tools and gamified curriculum, students using the Piano Express method make faster progress than the average method book student. And that helps students feel excited, accomplished, and motivated to learn new music. Also, the system is really adaptable. We've got teachers using the system in their home studios, and we have many large commercial studios running our 3-room model that allows you to see up to 24 students per hour with just 2 teachers. So if you'd like to learn more about Piano Express, navigate to grouplessons.com and sign up for a free demo. You'll get to look at the method, our app and teacher guides, and we'll even give you a sneak peek of our implementation plan that has helped hundreds of studios start their group program in just a few weeks. I love all of that. And there's a few comments I want to make, not to interpret what you're saying, but to really help folks if they're feeling confused about some comments that you're making here, to help them make sense of this. Because you related fun to the songwriting program. But it's maybe 1 in 100 studios out there that also have a songwriting program. And so that doesn't mean Nate's wrong. It doesn't mean you're wrong. But here's how I'm going to put it. I'm going to even simplify further than Nate. And bottom line, a child that is happy in your studio is a child that does not quit your studio. This is the key to retention. Okay?
Yes.
Now, maybe there was an episode we did, since we're at the end of the year, we're reflecting and all that stuff. There's an episode that we did a long time ago. It's episode 24. That was essentially me going on a rant for 40 or 50 minutes. Nate, you actually barely talked that episode, to be honest. And I think it is maybe one of the episodes I'm most proud of in terms of an episode where maybe I was a bit more dominant. And we've had episodes of, that you're more dominant, that I'm more dominant. And there's ones like this where we're kind of equal. Of the ones where I'm more dominant, I think this is the one I'm most proud of, that episode. Even though it was early on, wasn't nearly as experienced at doing a podcast as I am now, 182 episodes in. And I basically ranted for 40 minutes on student experience, but did it through the lens of my own studio at the time, right? And so what I want to say is that it isn't necessary, let's say, for you as a school owner to institute a songwriting program. Though if you did, you should use one of the sponsors of this podcast, which is Big Music Games, or some of the other programs that BMF actually licenses out to other schools. And you can, check the show notes for how to use those things. And yes, things like Big Music Games will increase fun. But bottom line, I actually didn't have a lot of frills in my own music studio. And again, in this episode 24, I really went into that. I was very much like my personality, was very efficient, to the point, no frills, no song and dance, nothing like that. And yet students would work with me for years and years and years. And my average time that a student was in the studio was a long time. And I had kids that were just, the majority, my average kid was moving much faster than the average kid in music lessons in the US. And I just know this because of how many studios I've worked with over the last 10 years. But even the kids that comparatively in my own studio were limping along, like they were the bottom 25%, they were still going faster than the average kid in any other music lesson. And it was in the context of a group program. And again, I go into it in this episode. That's kind of the 2-minute summary of that 40-minute episode. My point is this, is that even those kids that weren't moving very fast, who I could tell were only kind of half-hearted about music, they stayed in my studio. Because I made it so effortless for them to continue that they didn't want to quit. They were having a good time. And if I could summarize what you just said there a minute ago, Nate, it is that kids don't quit if it's fun or feels easy or some combination of the two. And that everything should be indexed to that value. Is it fun? Is it easy for the child? Because if that, in my opinion, is what you have going on in the school, it's fun, it's easy, it's rewarding, it's satisfying. We can put all kinds of words on it. The kid feels really proud of themselves when they get on the stage at Brooklyn Music Factory and they play, in the context of the band, on stage in front of 50 to 70 people. They feel proud of themselves. They want that experience again, or they had fun. In the context of my group lessons, they were really proud that they passed their blue book in 8 weeks when the average is 6 to 8 months, right? That is what keeps kids in the school. And to Nate's point earlier, if you are communicating those values to families and you're doing it well and you're helping families to see that you're clued into their experience, their child's experience, and you're communicating what that child's experience is to them, they will appreciate you more, and there won't be a communication problem that leads people to quit, even if the child is having a good experience. To me, that is the what of all of this. That is what we're trying to do. Comments, thoughts, Nate?
The communication piece is so essential because, in the traditional lesson, like you'd have a notebook open and the teacher would scratch a bunch of notes and things that they're supposed to practice, and a lot of it would be sheet music or whatever. If I'm a dad getting that at home and I ask my son, what'd you work on today? And he's like, I don't know, here. And he hands me this book and I open it up. It's like hieroglyphics. Like I have no idea what the experience was, right? So when you say capture the fun, communicate that consistently, there are two basic things that we teach right out of the gate beyond the brand promise to our teachers. And it's this: you have to communicate consistently, meaning all lesson reports have to be sent within 24 hours. And then the second thing is there's a good lesson report and a bad lesson report. And most of it has nothing to do with the words that you type. Did you take a video capturing the experience and attach it to that report, or did you not take a video? If you did Exhibit A, that's a good lesson report. I don't even care what you wrote. But if you attached a video of that student having that joyful experience, the parent will be happy. If you didn't attach a video, the parent will be looking at those hieroglyphics and not be able to experience the lesson. So I just wanted to highlight that as a very concrete, you could just do one improvement that I promise you, if you practice for 6 months, would help your retention. And that is train all teachers to turn that smartphone around and start capturing a 15-second clip of the lesson.
This episode is sponsored by BigMusicGames.com. As our listeners know, Brooklyn Music Factory is all about a fun, fluency-first approach to music lessons. And at the foundation of our teaching methods are rhythm, melody, harmony, and songwriting games that challenge students as young as 4 years old to train their ears and flex that musical mind. Because when you set an intention of gamifying every single lesson, you're going to find improved attendance, increased play at home, and higher student retention. So we've set up a website just for our listeners so you can start playing today. Go to bigmusicgames.com/7FMS and create your free account. Again, that's bigmusicgames.com/7FMS. And if you join today, I'm going to send you a personal invite to join our weekly teacher training call with me and Greggy Bizzle, our chief game designer. Go ahead and put play back into practice with Big Music Games.
I'm going to even use what you just said as a jumping off point and connect it back to what this entire series has been about. And I just want to go through each myth and demonstrate how simple this can be with even just that, quote unquote, I don't even want to insult what you just said by calling it a tactic, but that action that you just described there. So first off, in a way, what you described there is cultural. That is a cultural piece for BMF and could be for any school. You are creating culture by having that expectation on the teacher, and then even how you would deal with a teacher if they didn't do that is a cultural expectation. Like they'll know what happens. They will know the wrath of Nate if they don't take that video, right? and the fact that we know that that's a joke is culture too. That's the first thing. Second, this is delegation. And what we talked about in the delegation delusion was that delegation isn't just handing off tasks. It's culture meets all the things that it takes to hand off something like that. Project management software, meetings, training, like all those sorts of things, helping people catch a vision for the school, aligning them with the core values so that they're not just flipping their smartphone around. There's a deep sense of purpose and pride that they get by taking that video and sending it to the parent. Okay, that's the delegation illusion. Next, It shows you how, going back to the expansion mirage, that myth was about this habit that school owners have of adding on every program under the sun in an attempt to solve a margin problem. And doing something as simple as what Nate said here is something that deepens the experience. You go, and what we said in that episode was that you need to go deeper on what you already have, not wider, and adding things that you don't have. This is a way to go deeper within the product you already have. Okay. Third, the marketing myth. Marketing is just good sales at scale. It is good communication at scale. And what is this but internal marketing? You are internally marketing to that parent. Yes, you're giving them a progress report, but it is internal marketing, and it is giving them a cultural expectation. So do you see how just even in this one action, it is completely aligned top to bottom, from the highest and loftiest vision, value, purpose, mission, down to the action of just delegating this task to a teacher. It is aligned top to bottom, and it's what makes a school successful. Just even in this one action.
Yeah, lovely. Really nice tying it all together. The thing about retention, Daniel, to me too, is that, I mean, I literally just went through this in advance of that retention project. I was like, wait, I don't fully understand the math. Why not just get new leads? Why not just get lots of new leads and not worry about retaining all the families? I mean, I know in terms of what I always wanted to build at BMF in terms of the community and lifelong learners and all that, but it really is profound when you realize the value of a family at your school that's been there for years and becomes a real advocate for what you're trying to build. They end up bringing all of their friends and family into your community. And you start building, I mean, all the obvious things are there. You're spending less on marketing, et cetera, because word of mouth is doing a lot of the work for you. But you're bringing in the right kind of families for your specific purpose and values. And that is huge, right? You can't be a program like Brooklyn Music Factory and just let everyone under the sun through the doors, because everyone under the sun doesn't want to, there's a lot of kids that really thrive in a typical musical lesson. That's why they're offered in droves, right? In part. And not everyone wants their child to grow up as a songwriter and play in bands. And right. You know what I mean? Like, actually, my guess is, well, I got no idea what the numbers are on that. Someday I'll survey all of New York City. But
you can run for mayor.
But yeah, totes. I just, like, you can't underestimate the value of having, 30, 40, 50% of your families having been at your school for 7 years. And being like, let me tell you exactly what the journey of this family's been at this school. It's so profound to have them answer the questions. Like, we did that. Remember that episode we did on how to, I don't know if it was just an app on it, but we talked about giving tours of your music school and how to do it well. And I was saying at one point, I was like, oh yeah, we're not the tour guides. Our students are the tour guides.
Yes.
And we leave it up to them to answer the questions. Because who better can answer what the actual experience at our school at Brooklyn Music Factory is than the students themselves. But of course, you need a student who's been there for enough years, who's semi-coherent, meaning they're probably 7th grade or up. So you need those there. But then, man, is that a powerful tour. The parent is just so impressed when that 8th grader is the one talking about their experience, starting in a mini keys and going to jam band. And then now they're in a rock, write, and record, and they play drums, but they also sing, and they just added guitar. And like, they're the ones that are describing their experience. And that's a powerful, powerful part of this retention, of solving retention.
I was looking for those episodes because I think it was a part 1 and 2, but we didn't name it So
yeah,
obviously, so I was having trouble. And it's a big, long list on that episode guide.
180 to be exact.
182.
By the time this one gets on there. Oh,
yeah,
82.
182. Yeah.
Okay,
So in wrapping, Nate, this is kind of how I want to end, because at the beginning I kind of threw shade on tactics. I hope now people understand why I'm throwing shade on tactics. Because they'll work. That might actually be the worst thing for you. Because it's the difference between being on this treadmill of constantly needing leads and handing out attendance bracelets to children and churning, your entire student body every year. But being great at leads, being great at marketing, or you can focus internally and continually improve what you have, and it be the product itself is the most powerful marketing you have. I've said this quote over and over again, but it's been a long time since I've said it on the podcast. But Naval Ravikant has this great quote: "You're doing sales because you failed at marketing." Or I'm sorry, you're doing sales because you failed at marketing, and you're doing marketing because you failed at product. And at the heart of retention is this deep craftsmanship that comes in solving that core problem. How do we keep these kids hooked? And it is possible, even in a social media age. The final couple years at my studio where barely anybody was leaving, was the height when it was kind of the height of the Twitch streaming era, when Fortnite and Call of Duty were like blowing up. Streamers like Ninja and Tfue were having literally 250,000 to 1 million viewers per stream. Just kids watching these streamers play a video game. And in the midst of that, I had kids who were talking about this. It was huge culturally in the late 2010s. Every kid knew who these people were. Didn't matter. They stayed because we solved that core problem. And so we have done other episodes, and we have an entire category in the episode guide on retention where we do get a little bit more tactical. But the purpose of the series was to go big picture, was to talk about the core issue. And to do that in this time of year where we're reflective, we're thinking back on the previous year, we're thinking about how we want to do things next year to make things better. Even as you said at the outset of the episode, Nate, you've improved year over year. Best net income ever in BMF's history. Congrats. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because you combated these myths that owners continually, perpetually believe. What I will say is that if you want to combat these myths, if you want to kind of take on the Brooklyn Music Factory perspective, if you want to work with us, definitely get on the wait list for the Founders Forum next year. We're already talking about it. Reach out to Nate or myself to work on it in the meantime, if it's very urgent for you. Look at the resources that we've created in the past around these. There's tons of resources out there, and begin to take this seriously as we head into this new year. We thank everyone for listening to us, allowing us into your earbuds, your headphones, onto your YouTube channel to affect your algorithm. In 2025. There's plenty more. There's more exciting things to come in the upcoming year. We appreciate the fact that you've given us a slice of your attention. I know it is very, very precious these days. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your 2025, and we look forward to seeing you in 2026.